I don't want to compete to entertain you. I want to discuss with all mankind the specific and tactical means by which the heartless amoral machine driving this world binds souls unto decay and illusion, so that in understanding even the outline of the nature of pure selfishness and evil, we can consciously mitigate the damage that such souls are enacting upon us and plotting to enact upon every subsequent generation of humanity forevermore, and instead manifest a future which serves our own best interests and growth in harmony with this world that is our home. We all know how we feel about messy roommates, but far worse are those who encourage messy behavior so as to inspire bitterness among us. People act like the understanding of your own freedom and evolution needs to be fed to you in an entertaining fashion for you to consider it, as if God must prove God's self to you with a fun and catchy Magic Super Bowl halftime show that inspires you to think that maybe, just maybe, the examination of your own soul and the fight to ensure the freedom of future generations of humanity from tyrannical deception and oppression just might be more worth your time than following what's trending and thinking about what you want to buy next and drinking and gambling and chasing dollar bills and hooking up and bickering at all the wrong people. Would that you were merely the blind leading the blind, but you are sheep led by wolves. Yet these wolves are predictable, and the good people of this world far outnumber them. All we have to do is understand the nature of our enemy, and focus our will and our communication upon practical solutions to problems and directly beneficial activities that we can partake in, which bypass the imposed mass surveillance distraction prison and disregard the false virtues which are manipulated and manufactured to keep us bickering. And by understanding and discussing such things, our actions will intuitively improve, as will the eternal fate of mankind. Some people believe that evil is pure madness and has no rhyme or reason, and that's not the case. As a matter of fact, madness is in essence a neutral factor, and the only things that can be said to be truly evil are willful and conscious intentions to perform acts of cruelty or unjust exploitation. This can take the form of various psychoses, but psychoses in general are much less threatening than the calculated and willful intent of ultimate selfishness and evil, conspiring to make men into fools and exploit and traumatize us. Ultimate selfishness and evil will always seek the binding of other souls through rather predictable means, which should be consciously examined by all people who care to influence the fate of the earth in a more positive direction. These means primarily involve the subliminal degradation of virtue, which makes people easier to manipulate and keep in a state of apathetic obedience, as well as the imposition of illusions which prevent the pursuit and acquisition of truth. When people are separated from the pursuit of both virtue and truth, it becomes very easy for predators to bind them to their will. All acquisition and sharing of knowledge and wisdom should be done through the lens of practically encouraging virtue and or truth among mankind, so as to efficiently mitigate the impact of evil upon this world. Too often, people lose sight of the practical applications of spiritual knowledge and become lost in the sharing of unhelpful paranoias or frivolous platitudes which accomplish quite little as far as directly beneficially impacting the world. It's imperative to maintain sight of the simple fact that a solid foundation of virtue and truth is more important to the evolution of human souls than the vast majority of the particular belief structures that we become enamored with and adhere to. The most important belief structures are ones which encourage virtue and truth, and the value of all beliefs should be analyzed in that context. Now, as I mentioned, the malicious and wicked spirits who seek to bind and degrade mankind so as to control us and feast upon our labors do so through predictable means. They study our vices mechanically and know that we like to believe ourselves virtuous even when we aren't. As such, as I've previously examined in greater detail, one of the absolute primary means by which these wicked deceivers enslave mankind is by feeding us false virtues and convincing us to condemn anyone who disagrees with those false virtues. All observations of popular media should be done through a lens of skepticism, which questions whether the media is feeding us a false virtue or merely distracting us with inane frivolity. When someone carries a burden of condemning everyone who does not agree with the manner in which the news networks presented a particular topic, little do they know that this weighs heavily upon their own soul and quite often separates them from love itself. By explaining to people practically that only maliciousness should be condemned and not perceived foolishness, and that condemning foolishness is objectively a burden upon one's own spirit and actually quite ironically foolish, a great degree of unnecessary trauma in this world could be avoided. That should be one of the primary principles and understandings which is encouraged particularly in all aspiring spiritual communities. While it is morally correct to condemn truly malicious evil, it is morally foolish and wasteful to condemn foolishness and ignorance until it becomes consciously destructive. If we remain entrapped in the condemnation of fools, we will be stuck eternally condemning one another, and we will never have time to find and fight against our true enemies. Now, for many good people, it is difficult to comprehend this fundamental motivation of evil, to deceive and bind the souls of all humans so as to make us impure and prevent us from ever attaining the kind of spiritual power and righteous motivation which echoes eternally into the hearts and divine cores of all who truly listen to the power of our emanations. Yet this is the logical culmination of the polarity of purely selfish, unempathic consciousness, and it is quite common in this world. Therefore, it's critical to maintain a solid focus on the basics which lead to step one of awakening. The more people we can bring to step one of awakening, of merely attaining proper skepticism as to the motivations of those who influence our phones and the nature of this world and various understandings of psychology and motivation, the more people who reach that first step of awareness, the less destruction can be caused when the depraved witches and satanic necromancers in charge of Hollywood and mainstream media outlets dictate to their unwitting pawns that they should destroy and hate one another or themselves or society and blame a scapegoat as they do so. While we love to get caught up in the more complex schemes and plots which are binding and enslaving mankind, the establishment of a solid, logical, and moral foundation to encourage awareness while avoiding various common pitfalls will be as impactful to the shape of the future as almost anything else. And it's important to maintain awareness that there are many common pitfalls within aspiring spiritual communities, and particularly within New Age tomfoolery. Well, I truly believe that the establishment of rational skepticism as to the motivation of ultimate sociopathic selfishness and the means by which this plays out through division and manipulation, as well as the recognition that carrying the burden of condemning the wrong people is wasteful, are some of the most pivotal first understandings of an awakening spirit. It may be practical to break down the process of awakening one step further, to analyzing the fundamental motivation to pursue truth and virtue itself. This is largely dependent upon overcoming and recognizing the fear which causes most people to refuse to confront ideas that contradict with their worldview, rather than caring so much about the truth that they're willing to consider the logic of any idea regardless of how frightening it might seem to them and their often superimposed belief structures. Inspiring that core motivation is as important as any of the information that comes afterwards, so it's very much worth thinking about. Even if people are lacking in truth or virtue, if they desire to pursue it, they have taken the first steps into the path of continual self-improvement. Of course, there's a long way to go in that regard of overcoming fear, since most people are terrified of the idea that they might be wrong or deceived. And one example of that is the fear people have that aliens are real, in spite of the governments around the world basically giving soft disclosure freely over the past few years just to test how people responded. People have responded with predictable apathy about such things due to the mass social conditioning which has psychologically manipulated them into dismissing such possibilities over time. And I can personally explain the next level of disclosure to people repeatedly, which is that these aliens are interdimensional spirits that we can all interact with through our own spiritual alchemy and study, and which we've all been able to interact with psychically through the study of magic and the deep study of religion throughout time. The easiest way to communicate with them is to learn how to dream again, to learn how to purify your sleep and open your spirit to communication in the dream state. Having lost that is extremely tragic. Now, some of these spirits are pure evil. They are from hell, which is a real place, and they've manipulated this world for eons by doing things such as ritualistically torturing children so as to implant demonic souls within them. Meanwhile, some of these spirits, which are alien disclosure, are from heaven, and within this world, incarnating divine souls are very often so spiritually traumatized by the depths of evil they experience, which mankind tends to disregard as normal, that we struggle very much to properly emanate the divine love and radiance which are the true nature of our souls. Now, these sorts of absolute truths, which many of us through our own study and spiritual experimentation know to be objective, are of course very difficult for people yet enthralled by the frivolous and malicious illusions of this dimension to understand. So if we want to help uplift people and ensure a future which empowers the growth and freedom of mankind, we really need to focus on what it takes and what it means to bring people to the very first steps of awakening. Ideally in such a manner that they can avoid many of the false light, New Age pitfalls which fill them with vain pride and very often prevent them from confronting and fighting back against the darkness and evil of this world. That said, I would like to encourage the comment section of this video to become a place for people to reflect upon the necessary logical and philosophical understandings which can free people from the illusions of this realm. So please offer your thoughts in regards to how to encourage the first steps towards spiritual awakening therein. And as always, blessings and curses to those who deserve them.